Hi friends, let us learn how to draw the graphs of these functions. Y equal to cube root x minus 1 minus 1. First, let us understand how to draw the graph of cube root x. How does cube root x will look like? Cube root of some number. For example, cube root of 1 is plus 1, cube root of minus 1 is minus 1. So obviously, this graph will have positive values also, negative values also. Right. For example, square root of x. Root x is always positive by definition. Root 4 is 2. Root minus 4 is not defined. But whereas cube root of minus negative numbers is also defined, cube root of minus 8 is minus 2. So the domain is actually everything. Right. Entire R we can take as domain. That is cube root of x. Let's look at first how to draw cube root of x. Let's take this line. This is y equal to x. Right? We can all see y equal to x. Y equal to this. And x is 1, y is 1, x is 2, y is 2, x is 3, y is 3, etc. This line is y equal to x. Now, let's take another line. This, this blue line. Blue line is actually square root of x. Right? Square root of x, square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 will be 2. This blue line will touch somewhere right now 2 here. Square root of 2 is 1.4. So somewhere here. This blue line. Okay, if you notice square root of x is is always lesser than x as long as x is greater than 1. Right. For example, square root of 2 will be lesser than 2. Square root of 3 will be lesser than 3. The graph will look something like this. Square root of x, the graph of square root of x will look something like this. And square root of negative numbers we don't define. That's why there is no graph, no blue graph towards the left side of the origin, only here. This is square root of a number. And cube root of number. Cube root of 1 is 1. Cube root of minus 1 is minus 1. Right. Similarly, cube root of 8 will be 2. So this orange line will go somewhere here towards the right. And somewhere it will reach 2 when x is equal to 8. So this orange line is cube root of x. Now if you see cube root of some number, it will be lesser than square root of that number, which is lesser than that number when as long as x that number is greater than 1. So for example, square root of 2 will be greater than cube root of 2, right? And similarly 2 will be greater than square root of 2. Very simple. So as long as the number is greater than 1, cube root of x, the graph of cube root will be smaller than graph of square root, which will be smaller than 1. And these three graphs, what are these three graphs that we are giving? Which is y equal to x, y equal to x, then square root x, cube root x. These are the three graphs. As long as x is greater than 1, cube root of x is lesser than k square root of x, which is less than x. And the same thing reverses as when x is less than 1. So for example, when x is less than 1, when x is 1, all three are 1, right? When x is less than 1, cube root of x is greater than, in this point, see, cube root of x is greater than, square root of x is greater than x, right? So this is the point at which these graphs meet, right? So, and cube root of x will have negative values also, right? So the graph is actually like this, S-shaped graph. That is cube root of x graph. Now let's start with this. We know cube root of x will look something like this. Okay, cube root of x, we know it looks something like this. Now cube root of x minus 1. If f of x is cube root of x, then what is f of x minus 1? F of x minus will be cube root x minus 1. What is f of x minus 1? If you know f of x minus 1 is graph shifted 1 unit towards right. So this will shift here. So that means the graph would be something like this. F of x minus 1. Right. Now this graph, cube root of x minus 1 is this. cube root of x minus 1. What we want? Cube root of x minus 1 minus 1. That is the graph we are looking. So if g of x is cube root of x minus 1 and h of x, so g of x minus 1. What will this become? Same graph shifted down by 1 unit, right? Or if you take any function which we have already discussed, any function f of x minus 1 means the same graph will shift downwards by 1 unit. F of x plus 1 or g of x plus 1. Plus 1 means this graph will shift upwards by 1 unit. Minus 1 means this graph will shift downwards by 1 unit. So obviously, so this graph we want cube root of x minus 1 minus 1. So minus 1 means this graph will shift 1 unit downwards. So ultimately this is the graph. Right. We started with cube root of x. Cube root of x will look something like this. Like this S curve. Right, like this S curve. And then f of x minus 1 means shifting right by 1 unit. And then f of x minus 1 means shifting 1 unit downwards. Right, guys? Next one. Let's take this one. X plus 2 whole power 3 by 2 plus 1. Y equal to x plus 2 whole power 3 by 2. Now, x plus 2 whole power 3 by 2. Let's try to understand how does x power 3 by 2 look. X power 3 by 2. That means x power 1.5. That is x power 1.5. X power 1.5. Right. As long as x is greater than 1, x is greater than 1, x power 1.5 should be greater than 1 or greater than x. Right. So for example, if this is y equal to x, if this is y equal to x, as long as x is greater than 1, then x power 1.5 should be greater than x. So the graph will this graph will grow faster. It is not a linear graph, right? This graph will go faster. So look at this line. This is actually x power 1.5. Right. That is what is 1.5? X power 3 by 2. What does that mean? Square root of x right. This is square root of x whole power 3. Square root of x is always positive. So whole cube of this is always positive. So the graph will have only on the positive side of x. Right. That is this graph. X power 3 by 2 is this. As long as and x power 3 by 2 when x is 1, x power 3 by 2 is also 1. So this graph when 1 is crossed, this will be higher than y equal to x and below 1. Below 1. This will be lower than this y equal to x. Please note this. This orange graph is, put it like this. If this is y equal to 1, this will be something like this. Okay, this point is 1. Okay, this point is 1. X power 3 by 2, which it will be slow initially, which will be smaller than y equal to x until point 1. After that, it will cross y equal to x, and it will overtake this. The same opposite in terms of y equal to x power 2 by 3. I have drawn y equal to this one, y equal to x power 3 by 2 is this one. Similarly, I have drawn x power 2 by 3. It is exact reverse. What it will do? Before 1, this green one will be higher than y equal to x. And after that, what is x power 2 by 3? X power 2 by 3 is something like x power 0.6666 something. Right. When x is greater than 1, obviously x power 0.666 will be lesser than x. So that's why the graph will be like this. Now x power 2 by 3. X power 2 by 3 will have negative values also. Sorry. So is applicable when x is lesser than 0 also. Whereas x power 3 by 2 is not applicable when x is lesser than 0. Why? X power 2 by 3. That means cube root of x. Cube root of x is possible, right? For example, x power 3 by 2, x power 2 by 3 when x equal to minus 1 is 1 also, right? For example, and x equal to minus 8 and x equal to minus 8, x power 2 by 3, this is equal to 4. because this is equal to minus 2 whole square, which is equal to 4. So this x power 2 by 3 is defined over the entire line, whereas x power 3 by 2 is defined only on the positive x-axis. This is like 2 by 3 is defined on the entire axis. Right. Now, what are we doing? We have to plot the graph x plus 2 whole power 3 by 2 plus 1. So first, let's draw x power 3 by 2, which is this one, this orange one. Right, x power 3 by 2 is this orange one. This orange one. This we have drawn. Now, this one, f of x is x power 3 by 2. Now, f of x plus 2. What will this become? X plus 2 whole power 3 by 2. That means this one, this line is shifted 2 units towards left. That is 2 units towards left. F of x plus 2 is the graph which is shifted 2 units towards the left because it is x plus 2. Right. If it is if it is x minus 2, then it would have been shifted right. Right. In this case, it is shifted left. So the graph would be something like this. Right. F of x plus 2, that is x plus 2 whole power 3 by 2. Let's call this g of x. Right. Now we know g of x is this. What you want? G of x plus 1. That is a given question, right? That is a given question. G of x is this, g of x plus 1. Obviously, g of x plus 1 is the graph of g of x which is shifted 1 unit upwards because it is plus 1. If it is minus 1, then it would have been 1 unit downwards. So, this is g of x, which is nothing but x plus 2 whole power 3 by 2. Now, g of x plus 1 is x plus 2 whole power 3 by 2 plus 1, which is this graph. Ultimately, this black line. This one. This is the graph. Right, guys? Hope you understood this. It's a nice problem. Then next one. Let's look at another problem. 1 by x minus 2. Okay, we know 1 by x. How does 1 by x look? Then this is f of when f of x is 1 by x, this is just f of x minus 2, right? That is this problem. Now, how does f of x look? Okay, f of x, it will look something like this. Something like this. Something like this. Right, f of x will look like this. Right, f of x, when f of x is equal to 1 by x. What does that mean? When x becomes close to 0, x becomes close to 0, 1 by x, 1 by 0 will become close to infinity. So that's why when x becomes smaller, this y will become very large, large, like this. Similarly, when x becomes very large, y will become 0. When x becomes big, 1 by x will become very small, it will become close to 0. This is in the case when x is positive. So 1 by x graph is like this, but it is defined for when x is negative also. When x is negative, what will happen? Again, same. When x comes close to 0, right? From the negative side, if it is coming close to 0, for example, minus 2, minus 1, minus 0.5, minus 0.1, likewise. Then f of x becomes close to minus infinity, right? So that's why the graph is like this when x comes close to 0 from the left side. So, and similarly, when x becomes much away from 0 as and becomes smaller and smaller, that means minus 100, minus 1000, minus 10,000 and all. Then 1 by this thing, 1 by this number, this will also, it will start approaching 0. This number, when x becomes minus 100, 1 by this becomes minus 1 by 100, minus 1 by 1000, minus 1 by 10,000, etc., etc. Right? That means this number is coming closer to 0. Right? So the graph will approach x-axis. The graph will approach x-axis. So basically, the graph will look something like this, and like this. Okay, this is the graph of 1 by x. f of x is 1 by x, is 1 by x. Then what f of x minus 2? What is f of x minus 2? It is 1 by x minus 2. That means this graph f of x is shifted 2 units towards right. You know that, right? And when x is replaced by x minus 2, that means the graph is shifted 2 units towards right. So this graph, this line will also shift 2 units rightwards. This line will also shift 2 units rightwards. Okay, so this is the graph. You can see this, right? When this both lines shift 2 units towards right, 2 units towards right. So this line which was here is shifted towards right. So this is the new axis kind of thing, right? So this is the new graph. This line which was here is shifted towards. So this line which was here, for example, this was shifted towards 2 units towards right. So it will become this line. Similarly, this line which was here is shifted 2 units towards right. So that becomes this line, right? So that's why y equal to 1 by x minus 2 is these two lines. The graph is this and this line. Similarly, y equals 1 by x minus 2. Right. What is 1 by x minus 2? If f of x is 1 by x, f of x minus 2. That means the entire graph will shift 2 units downwards. So what was our original graph? Original graph was like this. Original graph was like this. Now this entire graph is shifted downwards. That means this line will shift 2 units downwards. So instead of this approaching x-axis, now it will approach this line, which is y equal to minus 2. This line, right? This one will approach this line when y equals minus 2. Similarly, this line was this. It will also shift 2 units downwards. So instead of approaching x-axis, this line will stop here. This line will stop at when y equal to minus 2. So ultimately 1 by x minus 2 is this graph. The y equal to x, y equal to 1 by x just shifted 2 units downwards. Right, guys? Let us look at the other problems. Then similarly 1 by x plus 2, 1 by x plus 2. 1 by x plus 2. What is 1 by x plus 2? 1 by x minus 2 is this. 1 by x plus 2 is shifting 1 by x 2 units upwards. That is this graph. Same. If it was 1 by x, it would have been like this. It would have been like this. Now 1 by x is shifted. This entire graph is shifted 2 units upward. That means this line will shift 2 units upwards. That means instead of this one approaching this line, it will approach this line now. Okay, that is this graph. Now, similarly, this one, instead of approaching this line, it will approach this line. So 1 by x plus 2 is actually this line and this line. Right? The symptom is actually y equal to 2, this line. Okay. Similarly, y equal to 1 by x plus 2. 1 by x plus 2. 1 by x plus 2 means what? The 1 by x, the graph 1 by x shifted 2 units towards left. 2 units towards left, right? F of x versus f of x plus 2. F of x plus 2 means 2 units towards left. F of x minus 2 is 2 units towards right. So our original line was this. Original graph was this. Okay. This entire y-axis is here. This one will shift here. Right. This one will shift here. Entire graph will be same. Instead of instead of these two lines, earlier were approaching y-axis. Right. This line is approaching y-axis. This is approaching y-axis and x-axis. Now, what will happen instead of they approaching y, they will approach x equals minus 2, this line. Right, guys? This is just shifting these two lines to the left by 2 units. Right. Hope you understood this. The shifting graphs is actually very easy. We just need to see whether what we are doing is f of x plus or minus some constant, or f of x plus or minus some constant. So if this is like this, then it is shifting upwards or downwards vertically. If this is like this, then this is shifting right or left. Hope you like this. Thank you guys.